My dad spent years draining my bank account to fund my brother's lavish life, so I took back all overnight and turned their perfect life crumble. I'm a 33-year-old male who grew up as the responsible son, the one who always did his homework, kept his room clean, and never caused problems. Meanwhile, my younger brother Adam, a 29-year-old male, was the fun one who could do no wrong, the classic golden child syndrome. My parents owned a small hardware store that barely kept the lights on because they were terrible with money. Dad spent thousands on fishing gear while the electric bill sat unpaid. Mom blew cash on jade figurines nobody bought while we ran out of basics like nails and paint. The place should have gone under years ago, but guess who started working there at 14 to keep the books straight? Yours truly. I spent my high school weekends reorganizing inventory, calling vendors to negotiate payment extensions, and dealing with angry customers while Adam played video games, and my parents pretended to be successful small business owners in the community. Dad was on the Chamber of Commerce, which meant free dinners and networking opportunities, not actual work. Mom ran a business owners' wives club that was basically just an excuse to gossip at fancy lunches. After high school, I worked my ass off to get a computer science degree while juggling 2 jobs, with no help from my parents. They were too busy funding Adam's gap year that somehow stretched into 3. I'd come home from a night shift at the gas station to find my parents had bought Adam a new gaming PC because he needed it for his future, while I was typing papers on a laptop held together with duct tape. When I landed my first developer job at a financial software company in Denver, I thought I'd finally broken free. I moved into a modest 1-bedroom apartment, bought a used Honda, and started building my emergency fund. For the first time in my life, I was spending money on myself without guilt or parental commentary. Wrong move. That's when the real financial abuse began. First came the calls about the store being behind on rent, then it was property taxes, then suppliers threatening legal action. Each time, I'd transfer a few $1,000s to save the family business. Each time, Dad would promise to get things under control, and each time, I'd discover they'd blown my money on something ridiculous, while Adam posted Instagram photos from music festivals I was apparently funding. I remember one particularly infuriating discovery. I'd sent $4,000 to cover an emergency tax situation at the store, only to see Adam tag himself at Coachella the following weekend with VIP passes and a new camera that looked suspiciously like the one I'd been saving for. When I called my parents to ask about it, Mom got defensive, saying, Adam needed this break because he's been under so much stress lately. The stress of what? Professional mooching? Over the next decade, I climbed the corporate ladder to become a senior software architect, making $175,000 a year. But I was living like someone making half that. Why? Because I was essentially supporting 4 adults, myself, my parents, Adam, and Adam's girlfriend, Amber, who moved in with my parents after getting between apartments 2 years ago. Amber, a digital influencer with 3,000 followers, preached manifesting abundance while living rent-free in a house and car I paid for. The worst part wasn't the money, it was the entitlement. They treated accessing my bank account as their God-given right. If I questioned any expense, Dad would remind me how they sacrificed everything for my education. Complete bullshit. And Mom would start crying about family loyalty. Adam would text me things like, dude, stop being such a tight ass. It's just money. Just money? My money. The money I earned by working 60-hour weeks while they lounged around complaining about how tough life was. The pattern became disturbingly familiar. Every 3 months, there'd be some new crisis requiring exactly the amount I'd managed to save since the last crisis. Car broke down. Roof needed repairs. Insurance premiums due. Supplier threatening legal action. Meanwhile, the hardware store never improved its situation. Dad kept hiring his fishing buddies as part-time help, paying them under the table and letting them slack off all day. Mom kept ordering inventory nobody wanted because she thought it was charming. By my early 30s, I was covering their mortgage on a house I bought them, car payments on vehicles I financed, and monthly allowances that disappeared into whatever hobby or impulse purchase caught their attention that week. Dad's fishing equipment had its own room in the house. Mom's craft supplies could have stocked a small store. Adam had every gaming console on the market, plus a collection of limited edition controllers he displayed but never used. All while they treated me like an open wallet that occasionally malfunctioned when I dared to ask questions. My cousin Ethan had recently moved to town for a job at my company. I'd put in a good word for him since he was one of the few relatives I actually respected. He had a solid work ethic, paid his own bills, and never asked me for money. Basically the unicorn of my family tree. He suggested a family dinner to reconnect with everyone, naively thinking my parents had changed since he last saw them years ago. Poor bastard had no idea what he was walking into. I agreed to the dinner, knowing that skipping it would just give my family more ammo to paint me as the ungrateful son. I even set a calendar reminder to transfer money to my family's emergency credit card, the dedicated one I used to pay for these inevitable group outings. So I showed up at this overpriced steakhouse, one they'd conveniently chosen knowing I'd cover the bill. The kind of place where a side of asparagus costs $15, and they charge you for each refill of sparkling water. The second I walked in, I could feel the tension. Ethan was already at the table, looking uncomfortable. My brother Adam gave me that smug nod he always does, his arm draped around Amber. My mom barely acknowledged me, too busy showing Amber some gaudy jewelry catalog. My dad, who had clearly started celebrating before everyone's arrival, was already in a mood. Ethan tried his best to keep the conversation flowing, asking about the hardware store. Bad move. That launched my dad into a 20-minute rant about supply chain issues and market conditions. His standard excuses for why the business was failing, never mind the fact that he hadn't worked a full day in years. You know what the problem is, Ethan? It's all these big box stores. They're killing small businesses like ours, Dad proclaimed, as if he were some retail analyst and not a guy who regularly closed the store early to go fishing when the weather was nice. Then my Uncle Jacob showed up, Dad's older brother, and the only person who ever called my parents on their nonsense. He'd moved across the country years ago to get away from them but was in town for business. The look on my parents' faces when he walked in was priceless. Mom immediately stopped mid-sentence in her jewelry discussion, and Dad's face flushed. Uncle Jacob had a way of seeing through their facades that always made them uncomfortable. Jacob was the black sheep who'd actually made something of himself, built a successful construction company, invested wisely, and never asked anyone for handouts. Dad resented him for it, always making snide comments about how Jacob was lucky or had advantages, when the truth was Jacob just worked his ass off and didn't waste money. The first hour was manageable. I sat quietly, enduring the fake laughter and forced small talk. Ethan tried to include me in the conversation, asking about my latest projects at work. I started explaining a complex financial algorithm I'd developed for trading platforms, when Adam interrupted with some story about an epic gaming tournament he'd almost won. Dad was getting deeper into his cups, which always meant trouble. The more he drank, the meaner he got. I noticed Uncle Jacob watching him carefully, measuring each refill with narrowed eyes. Sure enough, right as the main courses arrived, Dad looked directly at me and said, "Victor always was the selfish one. Adam got all the personality in the family. He deserves that suit more. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't teasing." He said it like it was common knowledge, like everyone at the table agreed with him. The table went silent. Adam smirked, enjoying the show. My mom kept eating like nothing had happened. Amber stifled a laugh. Ethan looked at his plate, clearly regretting his dinner idea. Only Uncle Jacob sensed the tension, but I was done. I put down my fork, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and stared right at my father. "You're not getting another penny from me," I said, keeping my voice level. That made him pause. His eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened. For the first time that night he actually looked at me. My mom finally stopped eating. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. The atmosphere in the room changed because, deep down, everyone knew the truth. My parents didn't care about me. They only cared about what I could give them. My dad's look turned mean. My mom, realizing her silent treatment wasn't working, tried damage control. "Victor, honey, your father didn't mean anything by it. You know how he gets when he's excited." Adam jumped in. "Dude, chill. It was just a joke." Uncle Jacob was watching everything with narrowed eyes, taking in the family dynamic he'd escaped years ago. I shook my head. "This ends now. All of it. The money, the handouts, everything." That's when my dad exploded. He slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. "After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful little—" He didn't finish the sentence. "You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job and your fancy apartment?" Mom started in with the waterworks on cue. Adam pulled out his phone, probably to film the meltdown for his social media. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear. Then my dad grabbed his nearly full glass of red wine and threw it directly at me. It caught me right in the chest, soaking my new suit, the one I needed for a client presentation the next morning. The red wine spread across my white shirt like a blood stain, dripping down onto my pants. The restaurant went quiet, with nearby tables turning to stare at the unfolding drama. I stood up so fast I knocked my chair over. Dad was still yelling. Mom was fake crying. Adam was filming the whole thing, probably for some TikTok. Amber was pretending to be shocked while clearly enjoying the drama. And Ethan, poor guy, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Only Uncle Jacob moved, standing up and putting a hand on my shoulder. "Let's get you out of here, kid." As I turned to leave, my dad shouted after me, "You walk out that door, don't bother coming back." "Fine by me," I said, not looking back. As I walked through the restaurant, my ruined suit dripping wine with each step, leaving a trail all the way to the door, the host looked stunned. I handed him my credit card and said, "Table 12. Add a 20% tip for the server having to deal with them. I barely slept that night. My suit was ruined, and my phone kept blowing up with messages from various family members telling me to be more mature and respect my parents. Adam had already posted a cropped video that conveniently left out the wine-throwing part, not a single text asking if I was okay. The video showed just my reaction, me standing up, knocking over the chair and storming out, with Adam's caption, "When your entitled brother can't handle a joke. Hashtag family drama, hashtag toxic brother." The comments were filled with people taking his side, calling me oversensitive and dramatic. Amazing how easy it is to manipulate perception when you control the narrative. Uncle Jacob picked me up the next morning for breakfast at a quiet diner, away from the chaos. The kind of no-frills place that serves breakfast all day and doesn't have avocado toast on the menu. "Been watching this train wreck for years," he said, stirring his coffee. "Your parents did the same thing to me until I cut them off. Different generation, same playbook." He told me how my dad had borrowed thousands from him when they were younger, always with some sob story about needing it for the business or medical bills, only for Jacob to discover later it had gone to fishing trips or new golf clubs. How my mom had guilted him about family loyalty when he started asking questions. He looked me straight in the eyes. "They're never going to change, Victor. Not your parents, not your brother. They'll drain you dry and then blame you for running out of money." Something about hearing it from someone else, someone who'd been through it, made everything click. They were never going to change. They didn't feel guilty at all. To them, I was still the bad guy who took away their easy life. After breakfast, I stopped overthinking and took action. I went home, made myself some coffee, and started making calls. First was my attorney. The house they lived in was legally under my name. They'd never bothered to check the paperwork, too busy showing off their dream home to friends. I had my lawyer list it for sale immediately. Next was their car, also technically mine, the luxury SUV with all the upgrades that Dad had convinced me they needed for safety reasons, but actually wanted because the standard model wasn't impressive enough to the neighbors. I called the dealership to arrange for it to be repossessed. Then I remembered the credit card I'd co-signed for them years ago to help improve their credit. Another huge mistake. I'd never removed my name, and the monthly statement was insane. $7,000 spent on fishing gear, online shopping, restaurant meals, and other crap I couldn't even identify. I called the bank, reported the card as compromised, and closed the account. I also checked Adam's accounts, 2 credit cards I'd co-signed for his emergencies that were now maxed out on gaming consoles and festival tickets, the same emergencies that always seem to coincide with game releases or concert announcements. Closed those too. The satisfying part was knowing they wouldn't get any warning. The credit cards would just stop working mid-transaction. The car would disappear from the driveway overnight. The house would have strangers walking through it for viewings without them having any say in the matter. After years of having no control over my money, I was finally taking it back. By noon, I was in a cab heading to my company's satellite office across town for my presentation. I had better things to do than sit around waiting for the fallout. The presentation was for a major client, potentially worth millions in contracts, the kind of deal that would normally have me stressed. But today, I felt oddly calm. Nothing my parents could do to me would compare to the pressure of this pitch. Ethan texted me during lunch. "That was intense last night. You okay?" I replied. "Better than I've been in years." And I meant it. For the first time since landing my first real job, I felt like I was actually in control of my own life and finances. No more bracing for the next emergency call. No more mental math about how much I could safely spend on myself without risking not having enough when they inevitably asked for more. I crushed the presentation. Without the weight of my family's financial exploitation on my shoulders, the client signed that afternoon. It didn't take long for the shit to hit the fan. The first call came from my mom while I was still in the post-presentation celebration. She was screaming, demanding to know why their car was missing. I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail while I accepted congratulations from my team. Then my dad called, raging about how I'd ruined their lives. Deleted without listening. I could imagine exactly what it said anyway. Adam was next, leaving a string of voicemails calling me every name in the book, saying I was pathetic for taking revenge on my own family. He threatened to expose me online. I blocked his number, knowing his idea of exposure would be more selectively edited videos that painted him as the victim. I checked my email during a coffee break to find a message from Amber with the subject line, "We need to talk about your behavior." The audacity of this woman, who had been living on my dime for years, lecturing me about my actions. I deleted it without reading further. By the time I finished my presentation, nailed it by the way, despite wearing a backup suit that wasn't nearly as nice, my lawyer already had multiple people interested in the house. In this market, and with that location, I knew it wouldn't take long to sell. The thought of my parents having to explain to their neighbors why strangers were suddenly touring their home brought me more satisfaction than I cared to admit. Then something unexpected happened. Uncle Jacob called. "Proud of you, kid." About damn time. I nearly dropped my phone. He told me he'd warned my parents for years to stop using me, to treat me better, but they ignored him. He said they got exactly what they deserved. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "Don't sell the house yet. I've got an idea." I didn't know what he meant, but for once, I felt like someone was actually on my side. Whatever his plan was, I was in. I met Uncle Jacob at the same quiet diner 2 days later. He ordered his usual black coffee, studied me for a minute, then finally spoke. "Your dad thinks he can do whatever he wants and never face consequences. He needs to feel what it's like to actually lose something." I liked where this was going. His plan was simple. Instead of selling the house right away, I'd wait. Let them panic. Let them see the car was gone, the credit destroyed, the bank accounts frozen, no backup plan, no one to bail them out. They'd lived like royalty on my dime for years. Now they'd learn what it was like to be broke. And when reality finally hit them, I wouldn't sell the house to just anyone. I'd rent it out, not to them, but to strangers. I'd make sure they watched other people living in that house while they had nowhere to go. "But what if they beg?" I asked. Uncle Jacob gave a slight smile. "Then they have to earn it." That confused me. My parents had never worked for anything in their lives. My brother was the same way. They were all convinced I'd eventually cave in and help them again. But if Uncle Jacob had a way to make them face real consequences, I was all ears. I called my attorney with updated instructions. Don't sell the house yet. List it as a rental instead. No special treatment. If my parents wanted to stay there, they'd have to apply like anyone else and prove they could actually pay the rent. The problem? They had no jobs, no savings, and no references, just massive entitlement. My attorney loved the idea, especially after I explained the situation. In all my years of practice, he said, "I've never seen anyone so thoroughly and legally deliver consequences. This is masterful." The next day, I canceled the automatic payments I'd been making to their utility accounts. Within a week, they'd be facing shut-off notices for electricity, water, internet, and cable. The premium cable package they needed because basic cable didn't have enough sports channels for Dad and reality shows for Mom. I also contacted the hardware store's landlord, yes, I'd been paying that rent too, and informed him I would no longer be covering their lease. He seemed unsurprised, mentioning that my parents had been late with payments long before I started helping them. "Only kept them on because you were guaranteeing it," he admitted. The final touch was removing myself as guarantor from their business loans, which I'd been pressured into co-signing years ago. Without my income to back them up, the bank would start looking more closely at the store's actual performance, which was abysmal. It was like dismantling a house of cards, each removal making the whole structure more unstable. And the best part? I was only taking away what was mine to begin with, money, credit, and property that had been earned through my work, not theirs. With each canceled payment and closed account, the liberation grew stronger. I was finally acting like the successful adult I'd become, rather than the compliant son they'd programmed me to be. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. My dad called first, his voice angry, demanding to know why the house was listed for rent. "It's my house," I told him plainly. "I'm the one on the deed. I'm the one who paid for it. I'm the one who decides what happens to it." "But we live here," he sputtered, as if that trumped legal ownership. "You lived there because I allowed it. I no longer allow it." My mom left a voicemail, crying dramatically about how I was destroying everything. Interesting how family only mattered when they wanted something from me. Where was this concern for family when they were bleeding me dry for years? Where was this family loyalty when Dad threw wine in my face at dinner? Adam sent a barrage of texts calling me psychotic and threatening to tell all our relatives what a monster I was, as if they didn't already know the whole story. "Go ahead," I texted back. "Tell them how the house you've been living in rent-free is owned by your psychotic brother. Tell them how the car you've been driving is financed by a monster. See how that works out for you." Then came the funniest part. My dad actually asked if I could loan them money for the rental deposit. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. I texted back, "You called me ungrateful, remember? Handle it yourself." But they didn't handle anything. Instead, they showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant knocked on my door, looking uncomfortable. "Your parents and brother are in the reception area. They're refusing to leave." I took a deep breath and headed out. The receptionist looked relieved when she saw me. "They've been here for 30 minutes, she whispered. "Your father tried to go to your office, but security stopped him." As soon as my dad saw me, he charged forward, pointing his finger in my face. "You think you can treat us like nobodies after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. "Done for me? What? Basic parenting? Feeding me and giving me a roof? That's the bare minimum any parent should do, and they barely manage that. Meanwhile, I'd bought them a house, a car, and covered their living expenses for years until I finally woke up and realized they never saw me as a son. I kept my voice calm. If you want to live in the house, apply like everyone else. But you'll need to show you can afford the rent. My mom jumped up. We're your parents. You should support us, not make us look bad. Adam stepped forward, phone still recording. You're such a pathetic little man. Getting revenge because you can't handle being called out on your attitude. My dad let out a bitter laugh. You'd be nothing without us. We made you. You owe us. That did it. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way they expected. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lose my cool. I just stepped forward and spoke clearly. I owe you? I built my own career. I worked for everything I have, and you blew every cent I gave you. Now you're broke because you never thought this day would come. Well, now it has. I turned to my assistant. Call security. My dad started yelling louder. You ungrateful little... But security was already there. Within minutes, they were being escorted out, my dad still shouting, my mom crying about what a terrible son I was. Adam was the worst, yelling that I was dead to the family and how he would make sure everyone knew what a piece of shit I was. I stood and watched them walk out through the main doors. For the first time in years, I felt free. No guilt, no doubts, just peace. What really struck me was how quickly they'd abandoned any pretense of caring about me once the money stopped flowing. There were no questions about my well-being, no attempts at reconciliation. Just demands for what they felt entitled to. I went back to my office and closed the door. Then my phone buzzed. It was Uncle Jacob. Good job, he said calmly. Now let's take it even further. I straightened up. What do you mean? He paused, then chuckled. You'll find out soon. The next morning I was having coffee with Ethan at a cafe near our office when my phone started blowing up again. Calls, texts, voicemails from my parents, Adam, even relatives who normally didn't give a damn about me. I didn't bother checking any of them. I had a pretty good idea what they were about. Ethan looked at my phone as it buzzed for the 10th time. You're not even curious? Trust me, I said, it's just more guilt trips and blame. Then Uncle Jacob called. I figured I should probably take this one. Turn on the local news app, he said, sounding almost amused. I pulled it up on my phone and nearly choked on my coffee when I saw the headline, Local Man Arrested After Vandalizing Luxury Vehicle. There was my father, being led away in handcuffs. According to the article, my dad had tracked down my car in the company parking garage, then proceeded to smash every window and slash all 4 tires. The cherry on top? He spray-painted ungrateful across the hood in bright red. The security cameras caught everything. Crystal clear HD footage of a 60-year-old man having a tantrum like a toddler. Even better, my company's security team had apprehended him before he could leave the garage. He was currently sitting in county lockup with a list of charges that would make a lawyer salivate: criminal damage to property, trespassing, disorderly conduct. Did you know he was going to do this? I asked Uncle Jacob. Not specifically, he replied, but I figured if we pushed him hard enough, he'd do something stupid. Your dad always had a temper problem, but he usually had someone to bail him out. Not this time. I laughed so hard I had to put the phone down. Ethan looked at me like I'd lost my mind until I showed him the article. Holy shit, he muttered, scrolling through the pictures. Your dad did this? Yep, I said. The man who raised me to be responsible and face consequences just showed his true colors. The calls and texts suddenly made sense. My mom was probably desperate for bail money. Adam was likely trying to guilt me into dropping charges. And the relatives? They were just nosy as usual. I finally checked one text from Adam. Dad's in jail because of you. This is all your fault. Mom's hysterical. What kind of son are you? I showed it to Ethan, who shook his head in disbelief. Your brother does realize your dad destroyed your $50,000 car, right? How is that your fault? I'm the responsible one, remember? Which means I'm responsible for their failures too. The most satisfying part? While my father was sitting in jail, the house went under contract, not as a rental, but as a sale. A developer had made an offer. He wasn't planning to rent it or fix it up. He was going to demolish it completely to build new townhomes. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. That house, the same one they'd shown off to make themselves feel important, was about to be reduced to rubble. The company was paying to have my car fixed, thanks to comprehensive insurance that covered vandalism. The claims adjuster who came to document the damage let out a low whistle when he saw it. Someone really had it out for you, he said, taking photos of the spray-painted hood. My father, I replied calmly. He stopped and stared at me. Your father did this? I nodded. He shook his head. Man, I've seen some family drama in this job, but this is next level. I finally listened to their voicemails. My mom's voice was weak. Victor, please, we're sorry. Your father just lost control. We just need a little help to get back on our feet. Adam's wasn't much better. I know we've had our differences, but you can't just leave Dad in jail. Then my dad's one call from jail, you worthless piece of... They weren't sorry, they were just desperate now that they had nothing left. For years they'd treated me like a walking wallet. Now that the wallet was gone, so was their love. I'd never felt more at peace. 2 weeks passed. My car was in the shop getting repaired, fully covered by insurance, thankfully. Dad was released on bail, posted by some distant relative, with a court date set for the following month. The house sale was in escrow, with closing scheduled in 30 days. During those 2 weeks, I received updates from various sources about my family's deteriorating situation. The hardware store had a closed until further notice sign on the door. My parents were spotted arguing outside a budget motel on the edge of town. Adam's gaming accounts went suspiciously silent, probably because he couldn't afford to renew his subscriptions. I used the time to focus on myself, spending evenings researching investment opportunities for all the money I'd now be saving. Curious and slightly concerned, I headed down to the lobby. They looked like hell, all of them. My dad had lost weight, his usually pristine golf shirts replaced by a stained t-shirt. My mom's designer clothes were wrinkled, and her makeup was missing. Adam looked like he hadn't showered in days. Amber was noticeably absent. Uncle Jacob stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching them like a researcher observing lab rats. Nobody spoke for what felt like a full minute. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "I lost my license," he mumbled, staring at the floor. "DUI after they released me. Can't drive the store truck even if we had money for gas." I wasn't surprised. My dad had always been reckless, thinking the rules didn't apply to him. Now he was finally facing real consequences. My mom stepped forward. "The hardware store is closed. We couldn't make payroll. The bank took everything." Adam looked up, his usual smug expression replaced by something I'd never seen before, actual fear. "Amber left," he said quietly, "said she wasn't signing up for this." That one almost made me laugh. Amber bailed the second the free ride ended. So much for loyalty. I crossed my arms. "And you're telling me this because?" My dad looked up, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. "We're living in a motel. Money runs out in 3 days. We have nowhere else to go." "Not my problem," I replied. My mom stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, real ugly, desperate tears. "Victor, we made terrible mistakes. We took advantage of you. We didn't appreciate what you did for us." Adam nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I was a jerk," he admitted. "I thought the money would never stop coming." My dad just stood there, broken, the man who had terrorized my childhood, who had manipulated me for years, who had destroyed my car in a rage, reduced to nothing. Uncle Jacob finally spoke up. "They've applied for jobs, all 3 of them. Fast food, retail, anything they could find. No calls back yet. Turns out professional mooch doesn't look great on a resume." It was strange seeing them humbled like this. The same people who had belittled my career choices while happily spending my money were now desperate for minimum wage jobs they'd previously considered beneath them. Dad, who had mocked burger flippers, was now begging for those same positions. Mom, who had looked down on retail workers, was now filling out applications to work the register at stores where she'd once been a demanding customer. Adam, who had scoffed at the idea of a 9-to-5 job as selling out, was now realizing that selling out requires someone willing to buy. I looked at them and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even anger anymore. Just nothing. They were strangers to me now, people I used to know who had taken advantage of my loyalty for too long. "What do you want from me?" I asked. My dad swallowed hard. "Alone. Just enough to get back on our feet." I almost laughed. "Alone? You think I'd give you money after everything?" "We'll pay it back," my mom insisted. "Every penny." "With what? You have no jobs, no skills, no prospects." Adam stepped forward. "We can work for you. Anything you need." For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as the controlling, entitled people I'd feared, but as pathetic, broken individuals who had spent their entire lives pretending to be something they weren't. I looked at Uncle Jacob, who gave me a slight nod. "Here's the deal," I said. "I own a rental property across town. Small, 2-bedroom, nothing fancy. You can stay there temporarily, under strict conditions." My parents' eyes lit up. My mom started to thank me, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. Dad and Adam work for the property management company doing maintenance and landscaping. Real work, minimum wage. Mom handles the laundry room, all supervised. No excuses. You miss a shift, you're out. You cause problems, you're out. Rent comes directly from your paychecks, no access to the actual money." The hope in their eyes dimmed as reality set in. This wasn't a bailout, this was a last chance, and a harsh one. "And one more thing," I added. "Dad pleads guilty to the vandalism charges. No trial, no excuses. You take responsibility once in your life." My dad started to protest, but my mom grabbed his arm. "We'll do it," she said quickly, "all of it." I nodded and turned to leave. "Victor," my dad called after me, "thank you." I stopped but didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet. You haven't earned it. As I walked away, Uncle Jacob fell into step beside me. Think they'll make it? He asked. Doubtful, I replied, but that's not my problem anymore. They can sink or swim on their own merits for once. You're a better man than me, he chuckled. I'd have let them rot. Maybe that would have been smarter, but this way they couldn't say I abandoned them. They couldn't play the victim. They had a chance, a real one, even if it wasn't the bailout they wanted. For years I let them take advantage of me. I gave them everything, hoping they would eventually appreciate it, hoping they actually cared about me. But they didn't. They only cared about what I could provide. Once I stopped giving, they stopped pretending. In the end, they destroyed their own lives. My father thought he was untouchable. My mother thought she could manipulate her way through anything. My brother thought he could ride their coattails forever. Now they had nothing but an opportunity they probably wouldn't take. That night, I deleted their contact information from my phone, bought a plane ticket for a long overdue vacation, and slept better than I had in years.